This is part 7 of the video series explaining the alternative property development model as an intervention based on the South African Economic Recovery Plan. Part 7 deals with the design of communal spaces in and around buildings, and in particular it focuses on designing for social integration. For transformation, President Ramaphosa says we will make a decisive break from the past. So let us take a look back at the way it was. Spatial planning based upon racial separation. And this photo is very typical of developments that were all over the country, and it was controlled by Group Areas Act. So in those days, societies were separated by law. Now let us look at the way it is now. We still have separated societies, and spatial planning now is based upon economic separation more than racial separation, but it doesn't really seem to have made any difference. This image shows a typical RDP housing. It looks much the same as it was, but maybe with even less space. The only change in color aspect is the paint on the buildings. Here is another example. This seems to be trending from bad to worse. This is just pack 'em and stack 'em. There's even less space for the individual occupants of these buildings. And you can see that they're all the same. There's no real design thought gone into the comfort and the utility of the owners. 2020 RDP densification. How can this be right? In 1849, a long time ago, that French writer Jean-Baptiste Alphonse Carr, he wrote, "The more things change, the more they stay the same." And development of this nature in South Africa seems to verify that. So even let's take a closer look at the buildings themselves. The National Building Regulations now has Category 1 buildings. Buildings less than 80 square meters, predominantly for habitation by low-income people. I don't see any real change here. And with making a category, in this category, it actually compromises the level of comfort that's deemed to be acceptable by low-income people. In principle, how can this be? It's not a change of mindset in any way. This is an extract from SANS 10400 Part A. The nature of developments is determined by environmental and town planning processes, which are independent of such choices like the ones above. This should be kept in mind by any local authority when assessing a building in terms of these revised functional regulations. Nowhere here is it written that Category 1 buildings must be clustered together in massive developments of mindless uniformity. That only repeats the past. This intervention is to have accepted a model that's designed for real change. The developments in those previous slides show no evidence of meaningful change, either in the buildings or in the controlling planning schemes. Even in the light of a massive backlog, economic separation by defaulting to the past system is clearly wrong. Social integration needs buildings and spaces that are designed for that purpose, for social interaction. So developments need a communal space. They need communal open spaces. They need high density buildings, need interior communal spaces. So in this new model, all the buildings and the spaces must be designed with social interaction in mind. In the normal profit-driven model, communal space is an upmarket concept, and it's not even considered in low-income developments, and that's clearly shown by those previous slides. So in this alternative people-centric model, these principles are the core element of the design. The extent of the provision is agreed from the outset, and the appropriate project sales percentage and the repayment terms for the government is calculated by the quantity surveyor from the outset. The process is sufficiently flexible to accommodate all kinds of variations in the nature of these social spaces that are imperative. Otherwise, without them, it's never going to happen. And the net cost to government for providing that and achieving their long-term goal is far less than the current model. It's conducive to the integration of low, medium and upper income accommodation all in the same development. And this is how you get development for social cohesion. So this is about changing the game. And where do we start? First of all, it's acceptance by the government of the financial model and the establishment of the funding and the payback process. Then reallocation of resources or creation of new resources for project startups, one pilot project in each province. Establishment of the initial project teams and getting the preliminary designs done. And that brings us back to design, the design of the buildings, and that's the topic of this video. Architects and designers everywhere dream of transforming communities, but largely they're constrained by developer budgets and the zoning controls. Those two things together, they don't lead anywhere. Government and planners can unleash all that restrained potential. Buildings and spaces around them can take many forms, not only to serve the function, but to please, to uplift, to empower, to create pride, and to enhance that social cohesion. The built environment belongs to everybody who experiences it. Let us look at some areas of activity where people interact and mix with each other. One of them is exercise and fitness. Most people are concerned about that in some way or another, and most people can't afford to go to those expensive gyms. So many opportunities and different options exist at the planning stage and at the design stage within the project. There's always space for an outdoor gym. There's always space that can be made where people can interact. It can be in a large facility or a small facility. Making communal outdoor space is important, and with exercise you can make an exercise facility in each project. Step training can come on sloping sites. It's just a matter of making a stairway in the site. If the sites are larger, you could have perimeter jogging around the outside. There's many different things. Outdoor gyms, they're not expensive, they're easy to install, and they can be used by everybody in the complex, and it's a place where people come together. Then you have external social spaces that have to do with relaxation. You've got your communal braai areas for recreation. And in most projects, you can have spaces designed for group activities, for children to play, and also spaces for quiet individual recreation. These are not difficult to build in. You just have to think about it. Communal spaces and play areas bring people together in an informal and relaxed way. And this is what creates harmony and cohesion right across all race groups, across all income groups, all different kinds of attitudes. This is a melting pot right here. Then we have the buildings, the structures themselves, and these require internal social spaces designed within the buildings themselves where people can interact and get together, not just rows of boxes where people just go in and that's it. They don't even know who their neighbors are because there's no amenity and no facilities for that to take place. It wasn't ever designed that way. That has to change. Every project has to have each building designed with some internal social space. Let us use again the Manzim Toti project as an example. So this project has the potential for a variety of social options. There's many different buildings in here. They all have different functions, but every place where people are living together, those elements need internal social spaces. You have number 3 here, block number 3, which is low income flats. that needs internal space. There's an amenity building there which it could be very flexible and used for many different things. There's another little block, block 1, which is a high income block. It still needs those spaces. Block number 2 is a block of flats. Again, it needs those internal spaces. Across the road on the business side of it, you've got hotel, casinos, you've got cafe, entertainment. These are inherently social spaces anyway, and there's a block of flats there with a shop. And again, those people that live there have to have that same kind of community space. Each element here offers a different opportunity for the designer to build in spaces designed for social integration. Without them, it's not going to happen. And this is the idea that has to get embedded, because that's the only thing that changes the mindset for future. It's not for this generation, it's for the next one. Let us take a look at some of the opportunities using this same project as an example, and look at some of the opportunities for social mixing that could occur. And this is not a bad example because it's got a range of economic levels throughout the project. This particular one would be block number 1, building number 1, 6 upmarket flats. Now, in an upmarket development, the concept of communal usage is a little bit rare, because people that buy into those kind of things, they like privacy, they like their own personal spaces, but that's not what this is about. This is about making something and designing something that has inbuilt features that would encourage social mixing. So there's only 6 units here, and at the bottom you've got private spaces for each unit, but there's a little communal area, which in this case could be a communal food garden for those 2 lower units. Those are the only units that have access to it. But if you make it there, then it could get used. If it's not there, it will never get used, and those 2 sets of people may never even get to know each other. And then on the roof of that building, this gives you more opportunities. And the design of buildings now becomes more important, because these spaces that are usually covered by roof trusses and tiles, these become spaces for transformation. On this particular building, there's 4 areas which are private areas. The tenants, the owners of those buildings, have got private roof spaces with gardens and so on. And then at the back there's a communal area which is accessible to all of them, again, which could be a common food garden or put to some other purpose that's agreed by those community members. If the space is there, it can be used. If the space isn't there and it's not designed in, it can never happen. Looking at building number 2, 44 apartments, you see that there are opportunities to do the same thing. This layout is maybe just designed for privacy and access for each of the units, but there's a small little external planting area which is a private area, and that's more to do with self-sufficiency in food, and those are dealt with on another video. But this is a fairly standard layout. It's just a design to suit this particular development. But what opportunities are there in a block like this? There's plenty of opportunity. This block could have a complete floor that's just a communal floor. It could be like a hotel lounge situation where people just get to come down and interact with one another. It could have an external space, which is an open veranda type space where people can go and sit. There can be areas to catch the morning sun, the evening sun. There can be quiet areas with a library and internet facilities for the people that live there. There can just be social areas where people can sit around and chat to one another, meet one another. You know, putting that one extra floor in there on a 13-14 story building, it costs some money, but this is what's necessary to achieve that goal, to achieve that objective, because without it, it's just another block of flats. Again, the roof area becomes an important area of opportunity. In this case, we've got a creche where people come with their children, where the children can be taken care of while they're away, security and safety, also where people can meet. There's a communal gym on the inside for people where they can come and interact with each other. You know, that area of the site, it might not be with having all the parking at the bottom, might not be conducive to having an outside gym. There's no reason why you can't provide that facility on the inside. And then there's a large open area where people can just get together and meet. You've got your planting areas or braai area, there's some communal toilet facilities and so on. The roof area becomes important, and it must be looked at as a social space, not as a covering for the building. Is a different concept. Looking at building 3, which is a subsidized building for the low income owners, the roof space is the same. It's got great opportunity for a gym, for a playground area for the children, for the creche, for an open leisure garden, a laundry where people again can use not only for function but also for getting together and interaction. And in the body of the building itself, at each floor, in the center of the building, the core of the core space of the building, where people from both areas will come to, in that space, that there can be a communal center there, communal building that can be used by all of the owners here. And that could be at every level. It could be, and that space can be designed specifically for purposes that are decided by all of those owners together. This building would have 48 flats, 8 flats per floor, 6 floors, and 3 or 4 communal areas built right into the structure in a convenient place. There's nothing to stop this from happening. The only thing that prohibits it now is budgetary, and it's financial, because developers want profit and they're not really interested in that in the long term. They build it, take the money and move on. It's not about that anymore. It can't be about that anymore. A larger view at that core area shows that it could be on the roof. There's your laundry and your roof garden. As you come down the building, there could be 2 levels with open terraces where people could just come and sit and enjoy an open space, looking out over the view, and maybe 2 double volume areas for community rooms at different levels. It can be designed in to suit the overall function of the building. But these spaces are accessible to all the owners in the building. And in this instance, for the low-income building, I would say that rentals shouldn't be done in that, not permitted in that building, just for owners, because we know what happens with tenants. Tenants come, they don't respect these kind of spaces. So this is about developing a quality of life for the people that own these buildings. Then we have building number 4, an 8-unit. I like the idea of it being a shelter for abused women with small children. There's a huge call for that kind of thing around the country. Why not provide it in a very nice environment? But in that building now, you've got a designated built area which has got a purpose for common usage. And at the lower level, the first floor level, this utility room could be common usage, not just for the people that are using the shelter, but for the other people on the property as well. There could be space for a physio, a therapy room, a couple of therapy rooms, and a library, where people can come and get those things that they would normally go out and have to pay for, the medical stuff. There's nothing wrong with providing this right here within the project community itself. And this facility at this level would be for all owners within the concept, whether they're the low income, the middle income, or the people that are using the and own the luxury building. They all have problems, you know. The second story of that building again has the units for the shelter and the security, and the utility room there would be reserved for those people using the shelter, not for use by anybody else. This is a specifically designed area for the people within the shelter, restrictive usage. So these facilities are restricted for the occupants of the shelter only, and they provide the space for personal use, which is in the little units themselves, and the utility room, it gives areas for group interactions and small little areas where you can have little clusters of seating for close intimate reactions, one-on-one, one-on-two, and so on. Some people like to be quiet, some people like to be involved in larger groups, but in terms of recovery and therapy and rehabilitation, a space like that would be essential, and it would be very, very welcomed. Across the road on the business side, you've got social mixing just by its very nature. You've got a hotel, a casino, entertainment areas. This is where people will come and interact and mingle anyway. So there's no specific requirements needed in that event, except for the building, the residential building that's on that site. So we'll come to that just now. But in terms of the project, this area is important because it's a business area, and having a business activity built in a project is important because it can be used, the profits of that business can be used, a percentage of them, to help and subsidize the low income parts of the other building, of the other parts of the project. A percentage of the profit from the business activities can go to a subsidy and development fund that's controlled by the project itself. The social spaces on that site are just a natural feature of its usage, and there's easy access to shopping, social, and all the public areas. A schematic cross-section through that would show on the left there the 44 apartment building, building 2 across the road. Then you have the hotel with all of its usages in that hotel, and at the ground level looking to the river, you've got all of the entertainment, external entertainment facilities, and then you have the block of flats on the right hand side there. So this would give large scale interaction between the general public, residents, holiday makers, and people just coming to use the facilities. It also gives significant opportunity for permanent and seasonal employment, and opportunities for ownership of all the on-site and the local support businesses that would supply that community there. So the community asset ownership idea of project shares within a project is derived from integrating business and residential together. Mixed usage is important. You know, social integration across all those levels. This is what's required for transformation, and inclusive design in the built environment is necessary. So let us take a look at how the different social spaces interact with one another on that particular site, because there's many different activities going on there. And the residential usage is effectively separated from the public entertainment areas but it has its own communal areas for interaction between its own unit owners. You see, there's many entrances. There's entrance for the shops, entrance for the entertainment, entrance for the hotel and the casino, and then an entrance for loading and so on. So these things are separated, and within the apartment building itself, there needs to be spaces within that building that are only for the use of the owners of that particular building. The ground floor of that building, a residential building, has a large central communal core. It's not just a corridor where people just go from the lift and then into the building. There's a circulation area where people can come. It's an open, it's got garden area. There's a braai area which looks over to the river, and it's a very nice outlook. But the purpose of that area, and the reason why that area is there, and it's not just a long block, is for social interaction. People coming in and out of these units at this level, and people coming from the upper levels to the braai area. This is a place where they will mix and mingle. It's necessary. Residential separation, effective separation from the public areas on the building site, on the entertainment side, are achieved, and also the areas designed for interaction of the owners is also achieved. This is just an example of how the design can incorporate all of those things that are necessary. And if the focus is on achieving a change of social mindset over a generation, then these kind of areas have to be included in all buildings. Again, we come to the roof area of that building, which in this case is at different levels. There's a roof garden, there's a common area where people can come and just function, little gazebos on the roof where people can sit and mix, a play area, creche for the children with a little playground, and an interaction area between the creche and the playground, and a common facility. And then on the upper roof, you've got your food garden, and food gardens are important in terms of sustainability of food supply. There's another video that deals with those within a complex, but on the upper level you've got your, on this instance there will be your food garden. There's a laundry, some accommodation for services and service people, a laundry area there, and a space for the normal water tanks and service functions that go with this kind of building. These areas are important. They're important for social mixing, for communal function, for people getting to know people and interacting together in a way that has been legally separated in the past. And the mindset of that has just hung on, and it's still hanging on now, and nobody can deny that. And it can only be changed by design. It can be changed by changing a person's mindset on something. Is not something you can legislate and tomorrow it changes. It doesn't work that way. It has to be done by implementation and by things working normally that end up with that result. Some of the things that come out in a glaring way when you look at the design of things for social integration is that internal and external spaces for social mixing and interaction must be a priority design element in all projects. Projects must include low, medium and higher price accommodation and the appropriate facilities for people socially. Many district projects within existing urban areas, the development of those projects, it's essential to take away and make a departure from the concept of mass RDP type thinking. The thinking has to be different. You bring it down to local district level, and there's spaces within all those areas where these kinds of things can be created. And collaborations are important. Collaboration of the designers, the planners, and the government enablers. In this generation, they can mold the minds and attitudes of the next generation by providing the conducive environment that leads to that change of mindsets.